All right, today we're diving into a story you think you know, but we're going to flip the script on it. We're talking about the Wars of the Roses, and more specifically, a secret final chapter that completely changes how we should see the end of that famous war. So picture this. It's August 1485. Richard III is dead on the field at Bosworth. Henry Tudor is the new king. The Wars of the Roses are done and dusted. That's the story we've all been told. But what if it's not the whole truth? What if the war's most important battle hadn't even been fought yet? So here's how we're going to unpack this. First, we'll look at why the so-called end of the war was anything but. Then we'll see how 30 years of conflict had totally changed the country and why the new king was so vulnerable. And finally, we'll track the Yorkist plots that led to what I believe was the real final battle of the Wars of the Roses. Okay, let's get one thing straight. The Battle of Bosworth was, without a doubt, a huge deal, a massive turning point. But it wasn't some magic switch that suddenly brought peace. You can't just end a 30-year civil war by killing one guy. The problems in England ran way, way deeper than that.
To really get why, you have to understand what England had become. This wasn't a kingdom that was just ready to move on. It was a nation covered in scars, where the entire rulebook on power and politics had been completely rewritten in blood.
And this, right here, is the heart of the matter. Before the wars, being king meant something sacred. It was this idea of divine right, that God put you on the throne. But after 3 decades of watching kings get overthrown and killed, that idea was shattered. The crown wasn't a gift from God anymore. It was a prize you took with an army. And it wasn't just about the king. The nobles themselves had changed. They came out of this war with their own private armies, totally comfortable with using violence to get what they wanted. They were powerful, they were armed, and they were used to questioning the king's authority. Honestly, England was a tinderbox just waiting for another spark. So you've got this whole generation of powerful, battle-hardened nobles just looking for an excuse to flex their muscles. And boy, did they find a perfect target in the new king, Henry VII. Because for all his victory at Bosworth, he had one massive glaring weakness. Henry's actual claim to the throne was, well, let's just say it was pretty flimsy, and everybody knew it. His Yorkist enemies, who were absolutely seething after losing at Bosworth, saw this as the perfect opportunity. They were not about to just roll over and accept this new Lancastrian king. Not a chance. So what did the defeated Yorkists do? They started plotting. And these weren't just messy, disorganized rebellions. Oh no. These were clever, calculated conspiracies with a very specific playbook, all designed to hit Henry right where he was weakest and put a Yorkist back on that throne. Their weapon of choice? The pretender. The idea was genius, really. You find someone, anyone, to claim they're a long-lost Yorkist heir, you get all the angry nobles to rally behind them, and suddenly you have a figurehead for a rebellion that looks totally legitimate. And they had this down to a science. Check it out. Step 1, find a kid who looks the part. Step 2, teach him how to act like a prince. Step 3, get the old Yorkist network to back him. And Step 4, launch a full-scale invasion. It was a methodical plan to take Henry down. They put this plan into action for the first time with a boy named Lambert Simnel. He was coached to pretend he was Edward, the Earl of Warwick. And this wasn't just a random choice. Warwick had arguably the best Yorkist claim to the throne. They were strategically going after Henry's biggest dynastic weakness. But Simnel was just the warm-up act. The next pretender, Perkin Warbeck, was an even bigger problem. He claimed to be Richard, one of the lost princes in the Tower. And this plot was being run by the Yorkist top brass, including Richard III's own sister Margaret of Burgundy. The chronicler Polydore Virgil even wrote that the rumor tore nearly all of England apart into factions. So you have all this plotting, all this anger simmering just below the surface, and it was all about to boil over into another massive battle. But this final confrontation didn't happen at Bosworth. It happened 2 years later, in a bloody clash that many historians now believe was the true finale of the Wars of the Roses. And don't just take my word for it. Look at what historian Michael Bennett says. The 1487 Rising was taken very seriously indeed. I mean, the phrase, the king was in harness and the nation was in arms, that tells you everything. This was seen as a full-blown national crisis, a fight for the survival of the Tudor dynasty. This rebellion, with Lambert Simnel as its poster boy, led directly to the Battle of Stoke Field, and it was a brutal, vicious fight. This was the last time that two massive armies, one fighting for York and the other for Lancaster, would meet on a battlefield to decide who would wear the crown of England. This was it. This was the final showdown.
Which brings us right back to the big question, should the Battle of Stoke Field be considered the real end of the Wars of the Roses? I mean, think about it. You've got two rival dynasties, thousands of men in the field, all fighting for the crown itself. If that's not a continuation of the war, what is?
Even after his victory at Stoke Field, Henry's fight wasn't over. He spent years stamping out the last embers of Yorkist plots. So the big takeaway here is that the war didn't just stop in 1485. The conflict just changed shape, entering a new and, in some ways, even more desperate phase.
It kind of leaves us with a much bigger question to chew on, doesn't it? When is a war really truly over? Is it when the last shot is fired? Or is it only over when the very idea that started the fight in the first place is finally gone for good?